topic for you all on today. It has to do largely with the idea of arts and the law. My guest, Sammetria Goodson, attorney at law. Thank you for joining us, for being well informed.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. And one of the important things about practicing law that I have learned over the years is that it's always evolving. So now we even have AI, which is becoming quite interesting. Then you have cybersecurity law, and that's a new area of law. And so I was thrilled when I learned that you emanate out of Texas. Is that correct?
Yeah, born and raised in Houston, Texas, and I'm joining you today from North Dallas.
Okay. And so is your firm in North Dallas?
Yeah, so my firm is based in Texas, based in North Dallas, but I'm licensed in Texas, Pennsylvania, as well as Jersey. So I have clients on the East Coast as well. So I split my time actually between Texas and the East Coast.
So tell us about yourself and what is an arts lawyer?
Yeah, so thanks again for having me. I am Sammetria Goodson. I am an art lawyer. And essentially what that means is that I am an attorney who focuses my practice on representing folks that are within the visual and performing arts. So that's distinctive and is a distinction between art law and entertainment, in that most entertainment attorneys focus on music, they focus on television, film, podcasting. My practice does have some of that overlap to the extent that my clients have those sorts of opportunities. But yeah, art law is my primary practice area. So my journey there started with me actually going to museums. Growing up in Houston, my mom took me to all of the museums that we could go to. So my mom was sort of arts and letters. My dad was math and science. And so we went to science museums with that. But yeah, I just developed a love for visual art. And what was really great about that is that my mother would take me to the particularly Museum of Fine Arts Houston. Would take me to museums, take me to spaces to see visual art, and what she would do is ask me questions about the work. And what I learned is that the work on the wall actually speaks to you. And so you can stand in front of one painting and learn things about the artist, learn things about the artist's voice and what they're trying to say to you. So that sort of captured my imagination.
What does your typical client base look like?
Yeah, so I studied art history, studied business, and then I went to law school to practice art law. At that time, art law was a practice. Well, no, in law school, you don't major, you just have areas of focus. And so when I went to law school, my area of focus was art law. That's what I wanted to practice, but there weren't any classes on art law. The closest, the closest thing to what I was interested in was entertainment law. And I had really great professors that drilled down and made sure that I understood intellectual property. They kind of focused me into intellectual property and business law, which is the foundation of my practice as an art lawyer. So, but when I went to law school, most of the art lawyers were tax attorneys, trust and estates attorneys. They worked for large foundations. They worked for the larger museums. And my vision was to always work with artists themselves, to work with the community. And so I graduated a long time ago from law school, did some other work. And then in 2018, started Goodson Law PLLC as a boutique firm focused on art law. So what I do now is I represent folks that are within visual arts and performing arts. So that means on the visual arts side, I represent everyone from artists to gallerists to curators to collectors to arts organizations to service providers, folks that are within the art market that provide services into the art market. So that would be art consultants, dealers, appraisers, folks like that. So there's a lot of individuals who are service providers within the art world. Those are also my clients, in addition to the artists and the galleries and the curators and collectors and collector groups and all of those people. When it comes to performing arts, I represent theater companies, I represent choreographers, dancers, I represent folks who are independent contractors. These are folks who are using the performing arts as their, sort of means of making a living. Sometimes they're affiliated with companies, right? But sometimes they're independent contractors and they're doing all sorts of interesting things around the world.
So why would a curator need a lawyer?
Well, what I do for my clients is that I help them do three main things. The first thing I help them do is to establish foundation for business, right? So that is setting up entities, restructuring entities, making sure that there's a foundation for any sort of business that they're doing. The second thing that I do is I help them protect their intellectual property, right? So any sort of creativity, any fruit of creativity is protected by one of the four main, the four types of intellectual property. So I help them protect intellectual property. And then the third thing that I do is I help clients manage relationships. So a curator would need, legal services, and particularly an art lawyer working with them, because a curator does those three things. They're especially independent curators. They're independent contractors, so they're running their own business. They have intellectual property in that they have their creation in terms of like exhibitions and literary works, things that they write, publish, things like that. So they have intellectual property and they enter into a lot of relationships. So that relationship may be with a museum that has hired them or commissioned them to put together a show. They could be collaborating with other individuals as well. So I also represent and have worked with curators that actually are connected to institutions. On that end, I'm looking at their contracts with those institutions and just making sure that they understand, their rights when it comes to intellectual property. So particularly for independent curators, an independent curator is its own. They're their own business, right? So everything that a business would need to run, that's what an independent curator would need as well.
How has the internet changed how we view and value visual art and photography?
So from my perspective as a lawyer who works within intellectual property, so the bread and butter copyright, trademark, the bread and butter laws that sort of are the underpinning of intellectual property, I won't say they're set in stone. They do change in response to what's happening with technology. But the concept of how that system works is well settled, as lawyers say. It's well settled. So what technology does is it just provides opportunities for there to be different modes of distribution, different ways for people to connect with art. So one of the major things that has happened with, let's say, the internet, and to drill down on the internet, I'll just focus on something like social media, for instance. Social media has really been a platform for artists and collectors to connect directly outside of the relationship with let's say like a gallerist or a go-between. So way back in the day, or not too far back in the day, if you were a collector, you wanted to get access to the inventory for a particular artist, you would develop a relationship with a gallerist, and that's the only way that you can get to the artist. Or you would go to a fair or some other environment like that where you can purchase art. Well, now with something as simple as Instagram, which is ubiquitous now, if you're a collector, right, you could just connect directly with the artist and direct message them. And now you have a direct connection with the artist. And that has worked to the benefit of both collectors and artists. There are many artists who have been very vocal about the positive impact of tools, platforms such as social media and Instagram on their personal careers. And that has been a positive thing. One drawback I would say with technology, though, is just my personal opinion of maybe what that has to do with like photography. So photography is an art form. And there's some really interesting legal cases that really are the underpinnings of how we think about copyright and how we think about art that have to do with photography. And one of the things that I think that is a negative is that because everybody has a camera on their phone, or their camera is a phone, right? Everyone thinks that they're a photographer, and there's all these filters and all these things that you can do. I think that has maybe not had a negative impact, but certainly it has presented a situation where we have to have a little bit more of a discerning eye for actually the role and appreciation for the role of the photographer in society. So the photographer is an artist, right? They're not just taking their phone and pressing, you know, a button and a photograph appears. That is a skill set. It is an art. And so I think that maybe the appreciation for the work of what photographers do has decreased because everyone just thinks, oh, I could just take a photo. But at the same time, I think the market for really good photographers, I've watched photography, and I represent photographers. I've watched photographers over time almost have more of a filmmaking eye in their work. They have become art directors, and that they're using the totality of their skill sets to bring the vision to life, to capture the essence of the person. That is a very particular skill set, and it is an art which is distinguished from just pointing and clicking with your camera phone. So I'd personally like to see more education around like photography, and I'd like to see more collectors collect photography.
So what about the person that took the photograph of the young toddler, or maybe she was a little bit more than a toddler, as she was gazing at a photograph of the Obamas at the National Portrait Gallery. And then it just sort of like took off virally as a very cute picture. And it became sort of a national sensation. That happens.
Yeah, it does. It does. Does it mean that that photograph of a child looking at a portrait, does that decrease the value of that? No. But I do think that there's a distinction between like photographers who are trained. Photographers are masters of light and space. And so there is training involved in that. There is experience for photographers who are going out and documenting our lives. You have to develop trust with your subjects. That's a different space than just pointing and clicking. Not to say that that doesn't have importance in our visual culture, right? Because think about the role of the camera phone, even when it comes to capturing instances of injustice. So all of those things are important. Yeah, all of those things are important. But I sit in a world where I'm constantly distinguishing between art and entertainment. Even within the world of art, I distinguish between fine art and commercial art. So I'm used to sort of straddling the lines between how we categorize things. But sure, yeah, there's a lot of wonderful things that come about from our ability to just like capture moments and disseminate them really all over the world. And that's another impact of the internet. You can distribute whatever it is that you're trying to do all over the world instantaneously.
So then let's get into the area of trademark law. That has some nuances in it. And I actually went through this trademark law discussion, even in formulating this educational nonprofit podcast, because the artwork, we wanted it trademarked. And it seemed to be a very specialized area of law in terms of getting that application finished.
Yes. Yeah. Once you understand how the intellectual property system works, which is really where I start with my clients. I do consider myself I'm a lawyer, but I'm also an educator. Every single one of my clients, I don't just do the legal work, but I educate them on how the systems work. Because once you understand the macro level system, then you get a better understanding of why things are the way that they are. I'll mention, I actually teach a class called How to Not Be a Starving Artist at the University of Texas at Austin, which is where I got my undergraduate degrees. I teach that course in the College of Fine Arts to undergraduate students. And we go over things that I do every day in my practice, such as contracts, intellectual property, negotiation, things like that. When it comes to intellectual property, yes, there are 4 types of intellectual property: trade secrets, copyright, trademark, and patents. And there are sort of systems and filing requirements for patents, trademarks, and copyrights. And then trade secrets are also an important form of IP. The thing with trademark is that trademarks are all about commerce. Trademark systems are meant to protect the fruit of marketing and branding. So when you have something like a logo, when you have something like a tagline from a visual side, you can even get trademarks for things like colors. Think of Tiffany blue. You can get trademarks for scents, things that you smell. You can get trademarks even for an experience that you create. That's called trade dress. That system is meant to protect what you do to market or brand yourself. So that's what that regime is for. Where people, and you make a filing at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. That's called the USPTO. Where people get a little bit confused and where they get bogged down in some of the application processes is that they are taking something that really exists in the world of copyright and they're trying to get a trademark for it. So the thing with trademarks is that, again, it has to do with commerce. So you have to have some sort of business plan for using whatever you want to register in commerce, in business. And you have to submit evidence to the USPTO that you are doing that. And when you do that, there's a lawyer on the other side called an examining attorney who's looking at your application. So yes, you do not. So for trademark, you actually have to prove that you are entitled to the trademark. Similar with patent, patent protects I call it the fruits of innovation. So patents protect inventions that are new and novel. Those are legal terms. And that could be designs, it could be processes, all sorts of things that patents can protect. But the purpose of a patent is to protect something that's new, it's innovative, it's an invention, it's sort of moving humanity forward in a certain way. So patents and trademarks work in tandem. Everyone interacts with copyrights on a daily basis. The simplest example of that is back to our camera phones. Every time you take your phone and you take a photo, that photograph is protected via copyright. And you, as the author, that's the way it's described at the Copyright Office, you have a copyright in every photograph that's in your scrolling reel on your phone. Copyrights are meant to protect the fruits of creativity, and that once you take an idea or once you do something and you put it within what we call a tangible medium of expression, a photograph, a painting, a sculpture, a play, a book, a presentation, a podcast. Any of those things are creativity and ideas embodied in some sort of a format. Most of the time, you will be able to get copyright protection for those works, including music, lyrics, poems, the list goes on and on. So most people are familiar with copyrights because we interact with them on a daily basis. Now, of course, any trip to any mall or store, you're going to run into trademarks because all you're going to see is logos all over the place, right? So that's where you run into trademarks on a daily basis. And there's patents for the car or the mode of transportation that got you there. But copyrights are what people are most familiar with and what they interact with. Trade secrets, though, I want to mention are important. If you ever hear about a company who has their secret sauce, it's the thing that distinguishes them from someone else, the thing that's sort of locked down within their company. Those are trade secrets. I mention them because in the world of art, where I exist, many of the methodologies and techniques, the things that artists develop, the way that they paint, the way that they do mixed media, the materials they use, those processes, those are all trade secrets. That is the one area of IP that a lot of artists just don't really know about. And it's really important to know that that form of IP exists, because in the world of Instagram and the internet, when you're posting online, when you're doing your Instagram stories, your reels, all of those things, you may be exposing the public to your trade secrets if you are not aware of what you are doing. And that has and can result in issues like infringement, where people can see exactly what your process is. You've sort of shared it with everyone all over the world, and that could cause some problems later on.
So how has AI impacted intellectual property?
Well, the law is always, with any technological advance, right? It takes the law a little while to catch up. I will say, though, that I I won't go so far as to say impressed, but I have taken note of the quickness with which entities such as like the USPTO or the Copyright Office at the federal level have responded to changes in AI. There have been a series of convenings. Of course, there's conversations about the role of AI in intellectual property at every level. At international levels, there's convenings, there's folks, not just lawyers, but folks who are thinking about the creative economy, folks thinking about the role of art and culture and how that and the economic impact of those two, worlds and entertainment also. There's conversations going around about AI, and it's almost on a daily basis. But from a federal government level, the USPTO and the Copyright Office did a series of convenings even last year to talk about the role of AI. And just recently, I was doing a copyright registration. What's the day? Thursday. So Tuesday, and I noticed on the copyright the registration page, they added this little sentence that said, "Hey, listen, if you use AI to create a work, you need to tell us that you did that, so that that can be recorded in the official registry for that particular work." So what that means is that everybody's responding to AI. I think for artists, some artists see AI as a tool of creativity. They see the AI as the same as a photographer might see a camera as an apparatus. It's a tool for art. So art making. So many artists see AI as a tool.
A lot of people have written children's books off of AI and the art that comes together for that purpose of creating children's books with AI. So how is
so what
that
I say to
happening?
So what I say to my clients is that, listen, if you want to get copyright registration, right? If you want to have something protected via copyright, then you need to make sure that AI is a tool and not actually producing the work, because you cannot get a copyright for something that is not human created, right? So there are rules around that.
There's rules.
There are rules around what is considered to be something that's even protectable via copyright. So the Copyright Office may reject your, application, or later, even there's a case where later they found out that someone used AI to produce a work and they canceled the mark. I'm sorry, they rescinded the copyright. A mark is trademark law. They rescinded the copyright. So my point is, when I have clients who say to me, "Hey, I want to write this book and I used AI to write the book," I say, "Okay, so did you just use the AI to come up with an outline? Did you use the AI to come up with maybe a structure? Or did AI actually write the book? Like, what percentage?" Now, is there a line that says it's this percentage versus that percentage?
Right.
No. The law is not like that. There will probably never be a definitive line that says 50% AI created is okay, but 60 is not. The law is always dealing with a series of factors. It's always dealing with, in some way, intent. And so those are the types of inquiries. But what I tell my clients is, if you, knowing that the law is shifting right now with AI, if you want to have protection for your work via the current IP regime, you need to make sure that there is as much human interaction with that tool as possible.
So then you get to the concept of TikTok, which is has been in the news quite frequently in 2024. And where are we with TikTok, and how has that impacted arts and the law?
In terms of the use of TikTok as a tool, or you're meaning that the ban of TikTok?
The banning of TikTok in the United States.
So, there's multiple sides to the politics around the ban of TikTok. None of my clients have lamented the ban, just because they're artists, and artists tend to figure out a way to get their work out, right? So there are
is
artists
the ban
who see
good or bad for the U.S. to have?
Yeah, it depends on what side of the politics that you're on. Do I think it's going to negatively impact any of my clients? No, they're artists. They'll figure out another platform. They'll figure out another way to distribute their work. Is there questions about net neutrality and access and free speech and all these other types of things that have to do with like the law and how it's applied in the United States that even like lead up to constitutional law? Oh yeah, there's a bunch of people that have an opinion about that.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say it's you know good or bad. My role for my clients is to help them navigate these types of changes. And so then the question is, for most of the clients that I work with that are artists, sure, they lament you know the ban. It's a very useful tool, right? A lot of money is made on TikTok, particularly in the
Right.
dance and choreography space, right?
Okay.
It's a great tool for exposure, right? So what I hear artists talking about is, okay, there's just one more avenue that was helpful for them to get their art out into the world that has now been negatively impacted. But the response is like, okay, so what do we do? That's where the conversations are with my particular clients.
Is Black visual art appreciating in value? Do you see it as appreciating in value?
It depends on what type of collector you are, right? If you're a collector that collects for joy, or you're a collector that collects and you see collecting as an act of, you know, social justice, you see it as something that you can do to make sure that you obtain works that speak to the Black experience, the Black diasporic experience, that work has always been valuable, always been valuable. If you're a collector who's an investor, meaning that you are entering or participating in the art market for the purposes of, you know, a return on investment at some point, and yeah, you would be paying attention to what's happening to the market for works either by Black artists or works that are representing Black subjects. So that would be figuration, that would be representational work. There's a lot more sort of activity with those works being sold now than there was, you know, let's just say 10 years ago. Now, in terms of why that's happening, and there's reports, right? So there's information about this. There are the art market is a business. So just like there are reports that track the rate of inflation, and there are management consultants that are tracking what's happening with the stock market, there are companies that are tracking what happens with the art market. Deloitte is one of them. There's art market reports. There's all sorts of organizations who crunch a lot of data following what happens in the art market, including what happens at auction. So it is very much a science in that way for the folks that are collecting art for investment purposes, who see art as an investment. So yeah, so there's a lot of information out there about like the trends and what's happening with the market overall, but then also what's happening with the work of Black artists. So that's one through line. I think what I'm, I won't say more interested in, but what I like to think about is just also what's happening with the value of art. It's also, to me, related to access to information and also scholarship. So I very much appreciate the role of curators. These are folks who typically have master's degrees in art history. They are educated with understanding how particular works fit within the canon of art, right? Like how it fits into art history. And so the more we have people out like that, out there doing work, being hired as the head curators for major museums. So whenever you see some headline of such and such person was hired by insert name museum to head up their, you know, collection of contemporary art, whenever you see something like that and it's a person of color, what you're also seeing is the value of the voice, the mind, the thought processes of those curators, right? The scholarship around Black art. You're seeing that be valued at the institutional level. And the more you have things like that, the more you have collectors, right? The more you have people like Swiss Beats and Alicia Keys collecting art and then having it in the Brooklyn Museum, which is an exhibition I saw 2 weeks ago. The more you have people in that space, whether they're athletes or celebrities or whoever, the top business people, the more they talk about their art collection, that there are collections, that also adds to the story. So I think there are a number of things that are happening that's sort of helping kind of underscore or put a little bit more air under the wings of what we think about Black art. But I personally think that Black art has always been valuable. Are the actual prices increasing? Are there artists who are, you know, doing better now than they ever have? Absolutely. And that's reflective of the activity in the market, the demand. It is a market. It works on supply and demand. But there's a demand for that work for all sorts of purposes. And it's just really wonderful to see some of the things that are happening.
If one of our listeners wanted to publish a book, how can your law firm help?
Well, that depends on whether or not the writer wants to self-publish or whether or not they want to work with a publisher. So I typically work at the tail end of those types of deals where if there's a publisher involved, I'm looking at the agreement between the writer and the publisher, making sure that the intellectual property is taken care of, making sure the deal points are what they should be, carving certain things out, right? So the publisher doesn't get all serialization rights or gets all the rights to make derivative works off of like the one thing that the writer creates. So that's what I'm looking at. So I'm representing the writer. Sometimes I've looked at agreements between the writer and agents, right? So I distinguish from so I'm not an agent. So I would not be as a lawyer, and some lawyers do this, but I do not. I would not shop your manuscript, for instance, to a publisher, or I would not like facilitate a relationship with an agent. What I do in my practice is I represent that particular writer in their relationships with those entities. If you're self-publishing, you'll probably need some sort of an LLC or some sort of business entity set up to actually be the container for the publishing house, really, that you're setting up to self-publish. And then kind of a similar thing, just making sure that your contracts with the printer, your contracts with all of the folks that you have to work with in order to get your book self-published, that those contracts are where they need to be.
How can we get in touch with you?
Yes, I'm available on Instagram at Goodson Law, but also that's my website as well. So it's www.goodsonlaw.co. So that's www.goodsonlaw.co. You can reach me there. You have questions, there's a form, you send it to me and it'll come into my inbox, and either myself or my team will get back to you. You can also reach out to me via IG as well. I post content related to art law and also just different relevant information for collectors and all the different types of folks that I work with. And then also there's a link in my IG to a newsletter that I have where I talk about similar things, actually, that as we talked about on this podcast, but just helpful information for artists.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Being Well Informed. My name again is Claudia Barber. I'm your podcast host, and we were delighted to have Attorney Goodson with us at www.goodson.co. Please look her up. We welcome you to, again, connect with her as we discussed arts and the law. Thank you so much, Attorney Goodson.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.